Thank you, Sam. And as Sam said, I'm a historian and not a genealogist, but genealogy does underlay the two books that I have written uh, dealing with my family, obviously. I got the genealogy bug from my father and my aunt, who unfortunately both of them died before the internet was very widespread. So they didn't have as many tools to kind of work with in doing genealogical research. But I did a whole thing for my kids and my niece and nephews, and then I thought I was done. And then what happened was when my father died, my brother and I inherited this remarkable collection of letters of our ancestors from Germany, from Württemberg, and in German, in Old German, as well as letters in English. Now, obviously, you can tell that my family was not one to throw much out. So, being a historian, I realized that particularly that the Old German letters were of importance because there were over 100 letters and documents, etc. And in fact, I was right. Uh, when I started getting into the research, it turns out that the letters that I have are only the second set of primary sources that are available for territorial Kansas. The other was Clara Shields' work on the Lion settlement that was published in 1918. So this has been very different. So the books are different in some ways. The Once We Were Strangers, which was published by the University Press of Kansas, is is a family story, but it has a lot of historical analysis in it. The Life and Death of Barrett, Kansas is much more of a narrative of the daily life of members of my family. The Once We Were Strangers covers the period from about 1830 in Germany up to 1890. The Life and Death of Barrett, Kansas covers the period from 1893, the beginning of when the Chicago World's Fair was held. I had a great uncle who was a security guard there, and all the way up to the 1960s. The story parallels what was happening to the small town of Barrett uh, during this period. So I'm covering an awful lot of territory. So when the I did want to mention that in carrying out my historical research, I did hit upon genealogical information. My father had always wanted to know more information about his grandfather, Heinrich Reb. And he went to Germany and he did all of that, and nothing happened, came up. But when I was writing The Life and Death of Barrett, Kansas, I had a great aunt who had spent a good deal of her adult life in rather fragile state. So when she died, I wanted to get her death certificate to see whether she had some particular condition that during that time. And on the death certificate, they were asking for the birthplace of her father. And it was in Kaiserlautern, which is in the Palatinate. And so that has led to my brother taking off on finding out more. But so that was a unexpected bit of information that I came across. Uh, once we had the letters, my brother and I obviously had to get them translated. The sheer number was an impossible thing to kind of try and deal with. And my father had gotten a few translated, but my brother and I could not have paid the money that would have been needed for your conventional translators. And he got in touch with the Northern State University that is in South Dakota, and they were willing to in part fund their German professor to do translations at a very minimal price. And of course, they got to scan the letters when they came and all of that kind of thing. So, in dribs and drabs, the various letters, which of course I didn't know what the contents were, so they were out of chronological order, came together. And it was then that I started piecing the story together. I should tell you, I had no knowledge ahead of time about, for either of these books. You know, I didn't know where Ebhausen was in Württemberg. So my questions were very much, what was their life like? So in order to understand things that were said in the letters, I had to do the historical research. I was lucky in having a professor from Cambridge University who had done a lot of work on economic conditions in Ebhausen. And I was able to draw on her work, and she was kind enough to correspond with me on some of that. So in Ebhausen, the family, the father was a worsted wool maker, and he died and left my great-grand, I'm trying to remember, it's my great-great or my great-grandmother to, no, it's my great-great-grandmother to, on her own, to raise her children who were very young at the time. And she ended up going bankrupt because she borrowed money to allow the oldest one, who was 17, Gottfried, to come to the United States. The idea was he was going to come and make money and get the money back to her so that she could pay off the debts. But he was not able to make enough money to save her from that. So she went through bankruptcy, and I have the bankruptcy papers. So the family eventually, anyhow, Gottfried ended up being able to accumulate some money and being able to buy tickets for her and the other members of the family to come to the United States. I should mention to you something that a lot of times people don't think about immigration from Germany to the United States. And this is that Gottfried apparently entered the United States illegally. He was only 17, and he was supposed to be according to the laws at the time, he was supposed to be registered with by somebody who was considered an adult, in other words, 21 or older. This helped explain to me why, when I looked at his citizenship papers and stuff, that he didn't apply for, he indicated on his papers that he had arrived at a time that he was 21. So there was some illegal immigration coming. And in fact, when my great-great-grandmother came, she did have a passport. But when I checked the other people from the village who a few weeks later followed, most of them did not have passports. So you did not have to have a visa or a passport to enter the United States. So as long as you could get on a boat, then you could get here. So they worked in a lock factory in Connecticut. And then there was one of the many financial panics that plagued the United States in the late 19th century. And they had stuck together, the brothers and the daughter and the mother. So they had a pool of money, and they sent George on a trip basically almost across the United States. He traveled 1,000 miles. He did not know about the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which was passed in 1852. He was going in 1854, and he had no idea that he was going to end up in Kansas. But he did. It was interesting following the letters that he was sending home about what he was encountering in the various states that he passed through, etc. And so once he got there, okay, he learned about preemption, which was because of the land hunger, the government allowed squatters to be able to preempt land and buy it at $125 per acre, which was the standard price going at the time, if they bought it before the land went up for auction. If they could not pay before the auction, they would lose the land and any improvement that they had made on it, because there was a lot of land speculation, and somebody else would probably have bid higher than they could. So George builds a log cabin, and there were log cabins in Germany, so he knew something about that. And the family came. And from there, they set up their lives. And my great-grandmother, Anna Regina, married Heinrich Reb. And one of the questions that I had as I was writing Once We Were Strangers was, how different was my family, or how similar was it to the other families and to the general conception of what German family was like. And in the literature, it is often stressed that the German father, the paterfamilias, was a pretty tough and sometimes brutal individual. They had been allowed to legally in Germany to beat their wives. And I found that that was not the case in my family. And if you allow me, I'm kind of sentimental in some ways. I would like to read to you a letter that was sent by Heinrich back to his wife. He had gone to Denver, where there was a gold rush going on at the time. He hadn't gone to pan for gold, but he had gone to earn money because there were no railroads going into Kansas at the time. So there was not much of a way to get your goods to market. So he was trying to earn money otherwise. So this is the translated letter. Dear Anna and mother-in-law, I am, thank God, still healthy. Work has stopped. I had to wait for 2 weeks before I received my pay. Then I thought of you night and day. I bought myself a team of oxen and a wagon, and I want to get going on the journey back home tomorrow. I yearn to be back with you again. I can find plenty of work in Denver, but I will have no rest anymore until I see you again. I think I can earn enough at home to allow us to be together, although I won't be bringing any money along. I send heartfelt greetings to you all and hope that these few lines find you in good health. You will perhaps want to know a great deal regarding what you should do, but I can't write it, and you will have to do everything as you see fit. He was giving her permission to do as her own judgment did. Greet our loved ones for me. Tell Heinrich, who is his son, that I'm coming home again soon. I remain your faithful Heinrich Reb. So in the second book, I'm not going to tell you, there's a whole story, obviously, which goes here. In the second book, I was dealing with letters already in English, and my family, and this family at this time, it was Anna, was my great grandmother's and her children. They got the photography bug, and they took a lot of pictures. So I was able to put into the book pictures such as, I don't know if you can see, but that's the picture of the farm, and they had pictures of what the inside of the house looked like. And that helped a lot. And I had to do research on, well, let me back up. The thing that surprised me most in dealing with the letters was I had thought that farming was just a regular rhythm throughout the year. And of course, there is a rhythm, but I could not combine the years into one thing. Okay, this was spring, and this was what spring was like, etc. Because I found that each year was immensely different from the other year. There were drought, if there was a lot of rain, they changed crops because there was a lot of agricultural research being done at the time. And so new crops were being introduced. And that was probably one of the most surprising. The other was that they were not stuck on the farm. John, who I mentioned to you, and this is his, let me see, you're going to see it backwards probably, but this is his book from the World's Fair that he had with him. Went to the fair. So did other men in the family. And then when there were illnesses in the family that involved lungs, for example, with my grandfather, they went off to New Mexico. And when she would have been a great aunt by marriage, got tuberculosis, they were off to California. So it was, and people were changing farms all the time and all of that. So that was a surprising thing to me. And to keep the theme of sentimental, I'll read you one letter from the life and death of Barrett, Kansas. John, at this point, had been seriously injured working on the railroad, which was not unusual at the time. And the railroads had their own hospitals where they took care of people. And he had had serious things in regard to bones and bits of bones in his body and this type of stuff. It took him about a year to really get about. And he had gotten some money from the railroad that he was going to use to buy land so he could marry his sweetheart, Lulu. And he couldn't buy land close into the town because it was too expensive. So he has walked now, as I begin the letter, 6 or 7 miles from Clinton, the closest town, and where there was transportation, to where the land is. And this is his letter. Henry County, Missouri. On the place and in my log cabin door, November 25th, 96. At 1 o'clock and no dinner, and eat breakfast at 5 this morning, and have walked and walked till I am all tired out. Dear Lulu, I hardly expect you will get this letter before I come, but 'twill do no harm, for it seems like 3 months since I bid you goodbye for a few days. I have run around and worked until I am nearly sick, and is raining this afternoon. But I will have to go 7 or 8 miles to catch the Clinton stage in the morning. And as I have to stop at Kansas City and then again in Atchison, it will take until Saturday anyway, and maybe more for me to get home. You have no idea how it looks in here in this cabin. Will try and tell you when I get there and all the trips I have had and the roads. I am glad indeed to hear you are well, and as I expect to see you in a very few days, I'll close with truest love to you, my own, my darling. I am as ever, your truly, John. So, Sam, I would be
Yeah.
open to discussion at this point. I do want to mention one thing, which people already probably know, but I did a little looking at Newton and then at Harford County. And you were very lucky in that when it was first founded, that you have a newspaper was available. And I use newspapers quite a bit in the life and death of Barrett, Kansas. And it goes from 1872 to 1924 on newspapers.com. But I assume that there may be other places where it very much might be available, but I had just wanted to mention that. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we'll open it up to questions and discussion. I'll turn on let me see, chat. Those of you on Zoom, if you have a question or comment, you can use the Q&A panel to type that, and we'll see those pop up. And also on Facebook as well. I've got that up on my phone, so if you type a question or comment, I can see it there. But I guess just yeah, it's amazing that you've been able to piece this together basically from the antebellum America right into the 20th century with the life and death of Barrett, Kansas. And I'm just wondering as you've put this together, what kind of so the subtitle of Once We Were Strangers is a German immigrant family in the 19th century. And I wonder what did you conclude about your family and how those past generations had an influence on the next generation, which then that influenced the following generation in terms of the family or the family or community culture or the way, the way people treat each other or the way they make their livings, things like that, that maybe are still reverberating with their descendants today.
I think that one of the things is that it reverberates with me is that, as you heard from the letter that I read from Heinrich to his wife, that the women in the family, both in Once We Were Strangers, and then when you get to The Life and Death of Barrett, Kansas, were very I'm not going to say independent per se, because they were living in a family group, but they certainly were seen as equals. In The Life and Death of Barrett, Kansas, where I find about inheritance and stuff, and this carries over from in southern Germany, in states such as Württemberg and stuff, the women inherited equally with the men. It caused problems because after a goodly number of generations, and you had large families, the plots were getting very, very small, and it was difficult to support oneself on what you had. But it did mean that I know that my great aunt Mary, for example, who you would meet in The Life and Death of Barrett, Kansas, was able to lend money to my aunt to go to college. And it was her money that she was lending. So I think that there was that came down through. Now, obviously, the farming per se did not continue, partly because members in the family did not marry, or else they died young, and this kind of thing. So you did not have, I had a first cousin once removed who had a lot of land in Kansas and who died about 20 years ago. And he was obviously in the farming business. He had a lot of farmland. But so there was a moving away from that. But I think that, as I said, in the particularly for the women, I think that there was a continuity.
We have a question from a Zoom participant. Do you have any knowledge of Germans who initially left for Russia and ultimately came to Kansas? And then in parentheses, near Schoenchen, Schoenchen, Kansas, is what they're particularly interested in.
No, I don't. But I'm going to tell you that I do know that in Ebhausen, the city has set up, I guess that they had individuals who went to Russia because they had set up some kind of relationship and stuff with all of that. I will tell you that there is, among the genealogical societies, particularly the Sacramento Genealogical Society in California, which is not just California. It's got people all over the world who do it, who have podcasts from people who specialize in research in particular areas, and I know that Russia has been one that they have done. There's also a German genealogical society in Cleveland, Ohio, which does the same thing. So you might have some possibilities. And if you join, which is not very much, let me tell you, they like this is being recorded. They record their presentations, so you could go back through and take a look and see what information they would provide. And they really bring in experts, not just from the United States, but from in Europe also.
Can we ask questions?
Yes, please, yes.
Can she hear me?
Yes,
I think
yes,
Uh,
I can hear you.
I have a question. Why did, uh, why did the people leave Germany? Was there a reason they wanted to immigrate to the US or elsewhere?
Well, in my great grandmother's case, they were just so poor. And at the same time, uh, I mean, we all know about the potato famine in Ireland, but there was also a potato famine in Germany and other famine. There was that I forgot what the term is for the particular winter, but there had been a huge volcano in Southeast Asia that had put so much into the atmosphere that you had so many particles and stuff that you, first of all, it clouded over the sun, and it also the water coalesces around the little particles, and so there was a tremendous amount of rain. So you were dealing with famine also is as part of all of this. So that is really why so many. And um, it was very difficult. I can't speak for all of the various states in Germany, but in Ebhausen, I can speak about. It was very difficult to be a citizen, and marriage was strictly controlled. You had to show that you had enough money and uh, good morals and all of this in order to be able to be married. And that wasn't possible for a lot, well, the good morals, they could, but that wasn't possible for a lot of the population. So during this time, you also had a tremendous increase of illegitimate children.
very interesting. One question I had was, how is it that the family letters survived to this day? And how did you always knew about them, or you discovered them, and how were they kept?
Well, I don't know how they were kept, but my father, when he got really interested in genealogy, made a particular trip to Kansas and he saw his two cousins. And the one cousin who was living off the grid, may I say, had just kept about everything that there was, from his family. So my father collected, and I'm sure there were more letters that he didn't get a hold of, but he collected those letters. And the letters in English might have been also, and my grandfather himself, I know, had been looking at German letters, so he may have had some too that my father got a hold of, and he may have had and I'm sure he got from his cousin the correspondence between John and Lulu, who were his parents at that time also. So somehow, although one of the things that I inherited was a scarf that I think was from the centennial year of the country, and it had been torn apart by rats or mice, I should say, and that mice had not gotten into these letters. I have no idea. They probably were stored in a trunk, and my father got them, and then he took good care of them. And one other thing also is, I think that a lot of families may have had German letters, but they could, the interest in genealogy, I think, has been really great in the last, maybe 20 years. But if families had letters, before there was that real interest and they didn't know German anymore and could not read it and stuff, they probably tossed them out. Sadly.
Yeah, and it's yeah, it's funny. I think about my like we were when my grandparents, my last grandparent passed away, and we were kind of cleaning out their house, and yeah, we found a box of family photos, but they had gotten water damage from sitting in the basement, and it's like,
Oh,
and of course there was lots that were preserved and were fine, but it's like, it's how much history just is consigned to such fates. Another question I thought of, and feel free everybody else to jump into, but another question I thought of was the title of your newer book, The Life and Death of Barrett, Kansas. Does that kind of speak to Barrett? This is a town that no longer exists. Is that right? I
that
mean,
is correct. It is a ghost town. What happened, and I didn't talk about the thing in regard to Barrett. Barrett had started out founded very early in the Kansas territory by a lapsed Quaker and some of his relatives and friends who came. He had a grist mill, a sawmill, and all of that kind of stuff. But he lost out on getting a railroad to a town that was actually set up specifically to offer to a railroad to attract one. In fact, they gave it half of the platted land, and so it kind of fell into it. It was never a town. It was a village, and the inhabitants, what I admired so much, the inhabitants worked very, very hard on maintaining a community there. Uh, and the story goes, as you know, they almost lost their post office and they fought to keep the post office. But then in the end, the post office does disappear. They had a grain elevator, and in the end, the grain elevator disappears. These things are just happening slowly but surely. But I also have all of from the newspapers and stuff, all of the events that they had. They would have a community cleanup of the local cemetery, which still exists. And I was just visiting there this summer. So, but what in the end happened was there were a lot of flooding, and there was a lot of stuff in the newspaper about, okay, how do we deal with this? And they came up with not the nicest solution at all, but they were building what was called the Tuttle Dam. And they figured that they would need to raise Barrett along with some of the other towns. Now, I have been there. I have been where Barrett was and stuff. There's on the cover, there's a little column thing and stuff. It was totally unnecessary because it was never needed as part of a reservoir and stuff. But the Corps of Engineers thought so. So you had, in the book, I couldn't follow with everybody who was mentioned in the letters, which I have, which, by the way, have been donated to the Marshall County Historical Society. But I took a guy by the name of Austin, okay, who you first meet in as he's driving by in a one-horse sleigh by the house that my family lived in. And then he has some kind of accident or some kind of illness where he has problems walking. And so you get you learn that he is being treated by somebody. Then he ends up having to go on, on the county charity rolls, and he lives in Barrett and stuff. And people in the community, some of the young people in the community, gave him did a play in which they charged admission, and they collected money for him. Early in the excuse me, I've lost my train of thought on that. Oh, early in autumn, another group of young people cut wood for him so he would have it for his house. And when he got to the point where he could not really take care of himself, one of his neighbor families took them in and took care of him until he died. And this couple was one of the last to leave Barrett. They celebrated their 56th wedding anniversary in Barrett before they left. And I thought that story just told so much about the community spirit, and that this was a town or not a town, a village that deserved to be remembered. And my family lived just outside of, had their farm just outside of Barrett, so they were going there a lot. So that's kind of the story about that.
Where exactly is Barrett?
Barrett, are you familiar with Marysville?
Yes.
Okay, it is about 20 miles south. I'm trying to see the map in my mind. It's about 20 miles southeast of Marysville.
Okay.
And actually, at the very end of the book, when I do a picture of when I repeat a picture of of where it is, I have directions on how to get there. From Marysville, go south on Highway 99, turn west on Yonder Road, turn west at 19th Terrace, go to the end of the road where it curves.
I'll be,
That's kind of poetic. It sounds kind of poetic, you know, turn west on yonder road and go to the end of the road. I like that. It's like a, you know, it's a sort of like a place from the past, you know, where you can go to think about
trees.
memories or something like that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think very much so. And I wanted to be sure to have it in the book because I'm not sure, you know, a lot of people who live there now don't remember Barrett and all of that. Although I did a presentation for the Marshall County Historical Society, and one woman who came up after my presentation had been a young girl, a very young girl when Barrett was ended up, well, not disappearing, but being torn apart, as it were. So, so there was somebody who remembered it.
Cool. Well, any more questions for Roberta before we wrap this up?
No, very good
No.
presentation.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for listening.
I have had grandparents who their parents came from Germany,
Mhm.
and I grew up around Abilene. I don't know if you're familiar with that or not, that area. And they started the New Basel community, and it was, they all came from, and I can't remember where in Germany, but they came as a group. And
Yes.
they settled an area south of Abilene, and it was called the New Basel. Now, I don't know if New Basel was the town they come from in Germany, or they just decided to call it that, but they started farms there. My grandparents talked about farming with mules and all nine yards.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know, Basel is was a major city, excuse me, in Germany. So they very well may have come from villages around there.
Okay,
I mean, Basel would have been a city, so they wouldn't have been, there wouldn't have been farming there per se, but they probably came from villages around there, and so they, but Basel would have been the you know the common focus because they probably came, they may have come from the same village. So sometimes that happened, but sometimes I know in my own in the records that I have, when the group followed who came as a group from Ebhausen after my great grandmother and her had already left. When they got to the United States, they dispersed. Some went to Michigan. One of them, who was a seamstress, went to Buffalo, which had a major German population. And so they might as a group come, but then not. But it was common for people. And even within the United States, there was a whole group of people from Wisconsin who decided it was too cold there. And they came and settled in Kansas, which had gotten, Kansas got good press, let me tell you, as a place to go to. And you know, it from you know, from dealing with the life and death of Barrett, Kansas, it got, you know, they were reporting on the temperatures, and then in the summer and stuff, you know, they would plow the horses, they would plow down a furrow, and they would have to stop at the end because the horses were already, you know, tired. And I know my grandfather talked about, you know, that if there was wind and stuff, they would sweat so much that there would be salt on their face and this kind of thing. So I don't know how it got such a, a good press, but it did and drew people.
One more question.
Sure.
Uh, did they come to Kansas because of the offering of the acreage? If you settled and could pay the $1.25 an acre, is that why they came to Kansas rather than, let's say, Oklahoma or Missouri? Or do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Yes.
And
in fact, that's part of the thing that when George was making his trip through Michigan and Illinois and all of that, he was finding out what the costs in Iowa, he was finding out what the costs of land were. And it was beyond the pocketbooks of, I mean, some of the land, if it was improved, already by that point was going for $50 an acre, which would have been an awful lot of money at that time.
Okay.
So when they got to Kansas and there was the option of preemption and all of that, of course, they were among the first who were there, so they were able to choose. The land that they chose did have a stream and that kind of thing. But the land, it wasn't until 1890 that the Census Department felt that Kansas was fully, you know, settled, as it were, by their definitions. And when you think about it, I just have written an article that's going to appear in Kansas History dealing with the settlement of it hasn't come out yet. It will come with the latest with the next edition of settlement in Marshall County. When you think about it, from 1850 to 1890 was only 40 years for all of that to take place. It's truly incredible.
Okay, thank you.
Certainly.
Yeah, that is some, it seemed like the 19th century was just a century of a lot of big changes and big events. You know, it's sort of, I mean, I guess the 20th century is no slouch either, but it's a lot to think about and absorb. So people like you who are historians are so very important to America and everybody. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. We need people who want to read history.
Yes, indeed.
Sure.
And I should say, I know we've got, yeah, I believe we have your books. They'll be available here at the library soon. I think they're either on order or in processing, but we do have these two books should be circulating soon. So hopefully folks can check those out. And I will sign us off now. Thank you again so much and have a good rest of your evening.
And you all too. Thank you so very much for having me.
Thank you.